Welcome back. So we're lucky the sun seems to be popping in and out, but we got a little bit of rain cover just in case, and we can carry on. So, you know, the Court of Appeal, I was there to hear Kurt do his factum. I was there to hear the Crown's factum before, you know, the three judges had a chance to decide in that particular appeal. And it was interesting because now in your matter, at the time you were charged, the people who testified for you did not have federal licenses. Is that correct?
Well, one of the four did have one, and another two were waiting. They had their doctors signed forms, but they hadn't received their licenses yet from Health Canada, which we know that can take, it was known to take up to 6 months for some people at that time. So. Yeah.
I noticed the Crown tried to spin that like, oh, well, there was yourself that didn't have a license, and then there was the people you were serving didn't have licenses, and the Crown tried to make that the sole argument that this is the reason it can't be constitutionally challenged, and trying to bar out the whole science. And now this leads me right into the next part, of course. What we know is sound is a science that Mr. Tusaw has brought forward, so maybe tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, they did try to distract from the science point by bringing in the dispensary and saying things like we had a recipe book which had claims in it that cannabis could help broken bones, and they tried to say that we were doing this for these minor things, and it wasn't the serious conditions that we were talking about, and that we hadn't met the standard serious medical need that was established in previous court rulings. So we actually really had the patients like Gina Herman, who had her license, really had a compelling story of she has physical injuries, and she was given opiates to treat those, which after, you know, about how opiates you need to take more over time, and then the side effects can build up. And she lost her family because of the side effects from these drugs. She wasn't able to maintain conversations with them because of the psychoactive effects of those drugs. And she lost, would you say, a portion of her life. And when she kind of came out of this the use of opiates and into using cannabis cookies and tea, she to slowly be able to rebuild those relationships. And it's been a wonderful thing to be a part of her life and to be able to see that happen, because I've known her for 4 or 5 years. And she's such a wonderful person, one of the most loving, kind of grandmother type women around, very gentle but very articulate in court, and she made sure that she told she gave her message very clearly, and it's what was quoted by the BC Court of Appeal as being her testimony as really striking the dignity part of Section 7, where you have, you know, a right to take care of yourself if that option is...
The right to autonomy.
Yeah, if that option is there, and there's no reason that for the government to stop you from doing that. So her testimony was very powerful, and the other witnesses as well from the club, Sandra and Ruth, their stories were really powerful.
I just found it interesting how the Crown tried to spin that. Of course, they had their licenses by the time, I believe, we got to appeals and everything, so everybody had their licenses, but the Crown did a very good job, and I'm wondering if that didn't lead into some of that 2-to-1 split, because the science was sound, but some of the way the Crown was spinning that certainly made it sound like it was just, you know, here nor there. It was a victory. So, I mean, I just found that part interesting. Now, the science that Kurt introduced, of course, comes down to the area of whole plants just not being fully explored, and even under the old program. What exactly do you feel is going to be the basis going forward to the SEC? It's the same argument, but it's, you know, how do you feel, I guess, from your position now not being, you know, you're acquitted, like you're now looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, it's the facts, the scientific facts were not challenged by the government. And you can read about it on the Cannabis Digest. it was a wizard battle between two scientists. The one was kind of like long beard, the other one had a bald head, and it was very mythical. And I made this blog full of images. It's really kind of funny. But what
is that Cannabis Digest?
CannabisDigest.ca.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, the scientist we had was much more compelling, and he established about 2 pages worth of the judge's decision, facts that he had established in the testimony. The government's lawyer, the government's expert only got about 2 or 3 lines in there, and he really didn't do a very good job of representing science, more representing Health Canada, and that was quite clear in that his final concluding testimony, it came out during the court trial that was written by his superior at Health Canada. So it was a little bit disturbing, and the judge said that at the end, that it wasn't clear about what the affidavit's conclusions, what the source of those was at the start.
No, I'm not an attorney, but they have to use those same 2 scientists, those same 2 arguments anyway, when they look at this at the SCC, do they not? They can't introduce new arguments or new.
No,
I don't believe so.
That anyway. The government haven't challenged the facts. They will persist, and those facts are that the cannabis plant produces trichomes on its surface, and at the end of the trichomes is a glandular bulb that is a reservoir of the medicinal compounds. And the trichomes and the bulbs were used, a metaphor of a golf ball on a tee, which I think appeals to the judges. It's very understandable how easily the golf ball falls just off the tee, if the wind blows even, or something like that. That's the case with cannabis, and we were able to present images. Bubble Man provided these beautiful images that we got to show the judge, high definition color images of cannabis. The first one looks like a beautiful fuzzy, looking at the cannabis plant, you can just see the white hairs all over it. Next one is a closer view of those glandular trichomes. And then the next one is a pile of the resin heads. And it's just the case that if you even were to dip a tea bag with cannabis in it, the dried cannabis with these resin glands over it, and you pulled the tea bag out, then you've separated some of the resin into the tea. Especially if you have some milk in it, because cannabis is oil soluble. But,
I think even by virtue of rolling, you make, in essence, the oils on your fingers form an extraction because an oil touches the trichome. For our viewers, the glandular head of the trichome, of course, is where all cannabinoids reside, barring actually not even barring flavonoids and terpenes, because they also secrete from there. So again, the glandular head is where our medicine is at, and in the stock, it's partially in the stock, and that's certainly the science that I'm glad is finally being addressed. And of course, I see America, they're talking about now solvent and solvent lists, and I'm just wondering where Canada is going to go with this. Once I believe we're going to win. You know, I believe that this is going to go forward. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to be up to the government to legislate, well, what is a safe extraction? Is it solventless? Is it with solvents? And what I mean by that is, do you use butane? Do you use isopropanol? Or can you only do dry sift and only do butter in your house, which is, you know, it's fire versus safety. And where do we draw the line?
It seems when we allow the people who know what they're doing, you know, the facilities to do what they're doing, then they develop these methods naturally. They work to make the best products possible. And you see that in Colorado and some of these extract factories they have there, where they've developed very clean medicine using just trichomes, and they remove even the wax shell on the trichome. And then these is very standardized formats that they can get into. And we would have loved to have that been the case when I was arrested, that we had a commercial kitchen, and we were actually looking for one at the time and had difficulties because of insurance and things like that. It was something we would have loved not to have been in that apartment building, and so just by necessity, really, in the future, definitely in the legal places now, we can see advancements in how we use extracts.
I mean, I see closed loop CO2 like they're doing. We have interviewed people, you know, on our radio show and other stuff where we've spoken to a gentleman from Amsterdam University there, and that's exactly what they're teaching, is closed loop CO2 and as a safe method of extraction. My hope is that that the government, when they legislate that we can have extractions, don't say, you licensed producers, you can make extractions and you can serve the medical patients, because then they decide what an extraction is. And to me, an extraction is still the holistic use of cannabinoids and not isolates, like we see in Sativex. That's GW's pharmaceutical, that's already in pharmacopoeia. That is exactly that. It's a direct cannabis extract. It's a derivative.
Yeah, this case really has challenged the monopoly that the pharmaceutical company has had on cannabis extracts, and Sativex being one of the few that is a plant-derived extract. It's a simple technique to make Sativex, but they do go through a lot to standardize the 1-to-1 ratio strain that they have, and you know, all that, which has helped people. But it is easy enough to make a tincture if that's what you need, if that's what works well for you. And there's certainly a lot more ways which we need. We can't just have one tincture method for everybody. There's many application methods that could be incorporated with extracts.
Well, even as Gail taught us, Ted's partner, she taught us grapeseed extract. I remember learning that. Dr. Ethan Russo taught us in the books, but Gail started using grapeseed extract as one of the extractors. So when people say, well, what else can you use? There's so many different extractors to use, and you can start with dry stiff. There's so many different ways to go about it safely. Question is, who's going to control that? And that's what my worry is. Not winning this legally, but who's going to legislate it, and who's going to be in charge of the sensible policy as we move into 2015, 2016, when these cases get decided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really want people to be able to access the extracts. Yeah. That is important for so many people, and really the general moving forward of cannabis medicine. And it's something that if it was being produced on a large scale, I think like the Tweed chocolate factory pumping out, you know, chocolates or whatever they would do, those would have a benefit to people who need them. So it would be something which I just would love to see more of in the future for all cannabis users, as we start to learn more about how it can be applied for different people to avoid certain effects that they might not want to have. 100%.
Most importantly is the kids as well. There's the adults, there's kids that can be saved, and this is where I look at CBD as an isolate and say, okay, for a kid that's suffering from seizures, that's one issue. But for someone like myself with antiemetic issues, you know, I need something different. I'm not sure which combination of cannabinoids, because they haven't done the research to actually tell me. And yeah, there's so much unexplored. But how much it helps people, and just that burden of knowing that if you have an extract on you, you don't face persecution.
Yeah, and if you have a skin lesion, you need a skin cream. Yeah. You know, and the application directly to the areas that you need it can be better achieved than with a dried herb.
No. And that's the other thing, is like right now, even right now, if we wanted to, I can't call up a licensed producer and order the creams, tinctures, or anything that we know work, not only for kids that may be applicable, but for adults, that you can't get that without going through quote-unquote illegal means. And again, this country holds that there's no medical value to the marijuana that the courts say has medical value. Yeah. It's kind of a hypocrisy we're living in, and it's going to be an interesting 2015.
Rona Ambrose seemed to be really against the idea of it recently in an interview.
Yeah, well, it seems the government's taken one last stab. I mean, even in our appeals, in our cross appeals, the government's taken more shots at still fire, mold, and organized crime is an issue that where public safety is in danger if they allow these home gardens, and I'm sure they're going to say similar thing for extractions. You know, we can't have people doing this. We see it in the States. We see them coming up with these different laws and bylaws, but again, they're only at the state level. Everyone's eyes are on Canada because stuff like you're doing is the first case ever to the SCC. Stuff like we're doing is going up to the federal level and putting
Yeah.
the federal government under a restraining order. These are historic times for Canada, but at the same time, there's a big entity, I believe, moving in, and I don't necessarily think that they have the best interest of the medical patients in this Canada at heart, holistically.
Yeah, there's a lot we can do with regulation, that's for sure.
Sensible regulation, for sure.
Yeah, and like even for places like Washington State that have legal access, they don't have very complete regulations, and that's going to continue for a while until we do figure it out.
Yeah. Well, Marijuana Inc., when they legalized, it's funny because Green Planet, as I'm wearing here, Green Planet Nutrients, shout out, sponsored me for years now, but when they legalized in Washington State, our sales for the company went through the roof. Everybody ran out buying grow tents and buying everything, wanted to start planting. They didn't realize that legalized meant that they can buy from Marijuana Inc. Marijuana Inc. is Bill Gates' former assistant, you know, and these are the big players in the game. These guys are private stock holding companies. All these guys up there that are getting these permits, it's kind of scary for me looking at it because I believe in a free and fair democracy, you know, and I believe that that's what Section 7, right to liberty, is all about. Barring medical patients and barring the arguments that stand, we see legalization on the horizon. I guess in closing, what's your take on some of the future outlook, as well as I want to take this time to just, in closing, give a shout out to an additional person, as you mentioned on a break, is Kurt Tusaw.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he has been like a superhero to me in some ways, just seeing him in the courtroom, being able to transcribe and do the courtroom stuff at the same time. And this isn't just blowing smoke, this is like seeing the man in R versus Barron, watching him do his factum in your matter. I've seen him in the courtroom a few times, the BC injunction that he won. He's just, he's an attorney that is just a really go-getter, and of course worked with John Conroy for many years.
Yeah, oh, he's very inspiring, and I hope we'd have more people like him coming out, because he's, you know, he's doing great things, and he seems very busy. So I would appreciate more Kurt Tusaws around in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely been on point for the entire course of the trial that we've had, and I'm really confident in him in the Supreme Court, laying down the arguments again to the 9 judges. And
9 judges this time. 3 last time, this time we got 9.
That's right.
And they just weigh over the same evidence once again.
Just keep multiplying.
Just keep multiplying. But that's okay. At the same time, we've got some of the best lawyers in the country and the best activists on the front lines, and they're not standing down in the issue of fair and reasonable access to cannabis for medical patients. On that note, Owen, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Okay, and we'll see you in the next movie. Cheers.